That question is so real right now. When institutions we were taught to trust start to feel unstable or even harmful, the first psychologically healthy step is naming what that experience actually is. It's grief, disorientation, sometimes just straight up betrayal. Now, trying to push past it with positivity or professionalism usually backfires and increases our stress. The body stays in kind of a vigilance until someone says it out loud. This thing that I've relied on or been able to rely on might not be reliable, whether that be by design or by destruction. Now, once that's said, there's often more room to think. It helps to separate identity from institution. Systems can falter, change, or fail, but your values, ethics, and commitment to your students remains intact. You don't have to wait for the structure or system to get its act together in order to act from what you believe. Now, this kind of dislocation doesn't just go away by naming it. You need other people, real connection, spaces where you can say what's true, hear someone else say it too, and not be doubted or redirected. Now, that alone doesn't fix the system, but it keeps people from disappearing inside of it. Now, that's a tough one. I would suggest one place to start is noticing what the reaction is tied to. You see, real concern usually follows something specific, an announcement, a memo, a proposed change that you can actually point to. There are questions: who's impacted? What's unclear? What this means for your student. Now, catastrophic thinking tends to bypass all of that. It skips to collapse. The language gets more absolute, the tone's more urgent, and there's rarely enough information to support the scale of that fear. Now, another signal is in the body. Concern might bring tension or unease, but you can still think. You can ask good questions, prioritize what matters. Catastrophic thinking feels like everything's on fire all at once. Now, that's the moment to pause, step back from the chaos, recenter around sources that deal in facts, not guesses. And even when the threat is real, when policy is changing fast and none of it looks good, it helps to remember this isn't your first upheaval. Systems change, sometimes without warning, but your judgment, your relationships with students, your ability to respond, they don't vanish just because the rules did. Now, that doesn't make the policy less harmful. It just means you don't have to let panic decide what's true. When the volume of news or social media starts to feel overwhelming, the goal is not to calm everything down, but to bring your nervous system back into a range where you can think clearly. One of the quickest ways to do that is also one of the easiest, and it's with breath, slowing it down, making the exhale longer than the inhale. 2 to 3 minutes of that is usually enough to interrupt that fight or flight response. It makes space to access what's actually happening. Now, another tool is sensory grounding, and this is under the umbrella of mindfulness. It's nothing elaborate, but feet on the floor, hands on the desk, noticing what's around you, what you can see, what you can hear, what you can feel. This works because it pulls your attention out of that loop and back into the room. And then you can start focusing on real regulation, not in your mindset, but in your body. Now, it also helps to set short, deliberate limits on how much you're taking in, stepping away from those constant updates, even for 5 minutes. You're not trying to avoid everything altogether, but you are trying to interrupt that system. If you compare that pause with a walk, a stretch, or even a moment of quiet without anything else interrupting you, the system calms enough to come back with judgment instead of reactivity. Emotional intelligence doesn't require us to treat all disagreements as equal. There's a difference between a difference in perspective in a position that threatens safety, dignity, or the right to exist. When the issue moves into harm, dehumanization, or erasure, the goal of the conversation changes. Staying grounded doesn't mean staying curious at the expense of your values or your humanity. In those moments, emotional intelligence is about clarity more than curiosity. It means recognizing when a conversation is no longer about understanding, but about drawing a boundary. You can regulate your nervous system, refuse to escalate, and still be firm. Now, that might sound like naming what you won't engage, stepping away, or stating plainly that some things are not up for discussion. Now, for educators especially, this matters because we were taught to be neutral and accommodating, but neutrality is not appropriate when real harm is on the table. Emotional intelligence allows you to choose when curiosity serves the moment and when protection, limits, and moral clarity are the right response. Collective care starts by acknowledging that people are not impacted equally. When organizations treat stress or harm as evenly distributed, those who are most impacted often end up feeling unseen or overextended. I find a healthier approach begins with naming that out loud and building space for different levels of support without guilt or comparison. From there, collective care has to be structural, flexible expectations, shared leadership, the ability to step back without penalty or judgment. It also means being deliberate about whose voice guides decisions, especially when the impact isn't distributed evenly. Listening becomes a form of care when it results in something real, not just that acknowledgement, but adjustment. And care doesn't sustain itself, it has to be reinforced. We do this with things like checking in with one another, rotating who holds that emotional labor, and protecting people's right to rest. Not as a bonus, not as an aside, not when the schedule allows, but as a part of how the work gets done. When care is distributed, so is the weight. And that's what makes it possible to keep going without losing people along the way. Psychologically, transformation begins when fear and anger are recognized as signals rather than problems to eliminate. Those emotions often point to values being threatened or boundaries being crossed. When people can name what matters underneath the emotion, the feeling becomes organizing energy instead of something that overwhelms or hardens them. What keeps that energy sustainable is regulation and direction. Without regulation, fear can turn into panic or aggression. Without direction, anger can collapse into despair or numbness. Practices that slow the nervous system, clarify purpose, and reconnect people to others help channel that emotion into action that is deliberate rather than reactive. An action lasts longer when it's shared. Not everyone doing the same thing, but people moving with some sense of coordination. Isolation burns people out. So does endless urgency. What makes effort sustainable is having roles that are clear, limits that are real, and room to step back without losing your place. That's what allows people to keep going, especially when the conditions haven't changed yet. If it has to be one, I would teach discernment. Discernment is the ability to tell the difference between what deserves your energy and what will slowly drain it. In moments like this, everything feels urgent, and that's how people burn out or start turning on each other. Discernment helps you pause long enough to choose your response instead of reacting to whatever's the loudest or closest. Now, you can practice that now by building in small pauses before you respond. So, before you answer to a headline, an email, a conversation, ask just three questions. Is this true? Is this something that deserves my attention? And does engaging move me toward the kind of educator I want to be? Even 10 seconds with those questions can shift your nervous system and return some sense of choice. With time, discernment does more than protect your time, it protects your capacity. You stay engaged, but not consumed. You stay available, but not taken apart. That kind of presence is hard to hold on to in systems that reward urgency. But in seasons like this one, it's what allows people to remain intact.